Facebook whistleblower has told US lawmakers that she believes Facebook's products harm children, stoke division, and weaken democracy.
It is causing teenagers to be exposed to more anorexia content. It is pulling families apart. And in places like Ethiopia, it's literally fanning ethnic violence.
Well, talk about turning on your former employer. That is the Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen revealing the dark side of the social media giant that also owns Instagram and WhatsApp. Testifying before Congress earlier this month, she described how her former employer damages children, enables sectarian conflict, and undermines democracy, all for profit. Facebook has responded by trying to discredit her, depicting her as a relatively junior employee who doesn't know what she's talking about. But Facebook better watch out. If her testimony to Congress is anything to go by, this woman is ready for a fight.
If Instagram is such a positive force, have we seen a golden age of teenage mental health in the last 10 years? No, we've seen escalating rates of suicide and depression amongst teenagers. My name is Frances Haugen. I used to work at Facebook. I'm here today because I believe Facebook's products harm children, stoke division, and weaken our democracy. I came forward at great personal risk because I believe we still have time to act. But we must act now. The choices being made inside of Facebook are disastrous for our children, for our public safety, for our privacy, and for our democracy. When we realized big tobacco was hiding the harms it caused, the government took action. When we figured out cars were safer with seatbelts, the government took action. I implore you to do the same here. Facebook has repeatedly misled the public about what its own research reveals about the safety of children, the efficacy of its artificial intelligence systems, and its role in spreading divisive and extreme messages. It is causing teenagers to be exposed to more anorexia content. It is pulling families apart. And in places like Ethiopia, it's literally fanning ethnic violence. Facebook understands that if they want to continue to grow, they have to find new users. And the way they'll do that is by making sure that children establish habits before they have good self-regulation.
By hooking kids.
By hooking kids. Kids are saying, I am unhappy when I use Instagram and I can't stop. That if I leave, I'm afraid I'll be ostracized.
Right.
And that's so sad. The bullying follows them home. It follows them into their bedrooms. The last thing they see before they go to bed at night is someone being cruel to them. They grow up with the idea that it's okay to be treated badly by people who allegedly care about them. That's a scary future. Almost no one outside of Facebook knows what happens inside of Facebook. A company with such frightening influence over so many people, over their deepest thoughts, feelings, and behavior, needs real oversight. The buck stops with Mark. There is no one currently holding Mark accountable but himself.
We're going to look back 20 years from now. All of us are going to be like, what in the hell were we thinking?
Well, Frances Haugen is right to point out the harm done to children. It's happening all over the world, but let's have a look at what's going on in the UK in particular. A report published by Girl Guiding says that 2 in 5 girls, nearly 40%, aged 11 to 16 in the UK, say they have seen images online that make them feel insecure or less confident about themselves. On the other side of the world, we spoke to Ashley Thomas, a 20-year-old from Australia, who believes her anorexia began at 13 as a direct result of using Instagram.
It started with influencers pushing to drink green juices and then look at their shopping trolleys and see what they were buying, and then I would follow what they were buying gospelly and only eat that. I began then looking in the mirror and seeing that what I was seeing was still not beautiful, so I began then restricting and starving myself.
Well, Ashley also told us that Facebook can prevent other children suffering in the future by simply changing its algorithm and putting simple safeguards in place.
Facebook and Instagram, they have the power to change the algorithm, and they have the power to put in notifications for people to seek help and to, get, as you said, put in age restrictions, but also verification then. So if someone is younger, contact a parent, or you have to get parental permission or something like that, because at the moment what is happening is not working.
Well, let's bring in Josh Golin now. He's the Executive Director at Fair Play, which attempts to keep children safe from commercials and social media. Josh, you've been doing that for some 20 years now. How much did it mean to you to hear a Facebook whistleblower acknowledge the harm done to children over the years?
I think it was a watershed moment. I think we knew from outside research that how damaging Instagram was to teens and children, but to know that Facebook had its own internal research and that they buried that research and that they, publicly were casting doubt on academic research while at the same time they were sitting on this really incredibly concerning research was such a big moment. I think it has galvanized people. It has galvanized politicians to want to do something about the harmful business model of Facebook and other social media platforms. So I think this could be the moment that actually changes the system that ensnares so many children and is so harmful to kids and teens.
Do you think Facebook should be prosecuted for that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that if you know you are harming children and you not only don't do anything about it, but you hide the fact that you were aware of that, I think Facebook should be held liable for that. I think you will see lots of lawsuits against Facebook. And I know that regulators are looking right now at these Facebook documents that they buried. And I am very hopeful we will see legal action against Facebook.
Okay, that'd be very interesting. Facebook's put its plans for an Instagram for kids on hold, partly as a result of your campaign. Why are you so strongly against such a platform?
Well, we know that Instagram is harmful already to teens. And so the idea that a platform that is all about photo sharing, about uploading pictures of yourselves and having your friends and strangers rate those pictures by giving you likes and comments is just a completely inappropriate platform for younger children. And, and the fact that Facebook claims that this is to deal with the fact that underage children are lying their way onto Instagram is just a completely disingenuous answer. I mean, the fact of the matter is those 10, 11, and 12-year-olds who are lying their way onto Instagram are not going to be caught dead on a Instagram for kids. They're going to see that as too babyish.
Yes.
The real audience for this platform are 6, 7, and 8-year-olds who don't have Instagram accounts yet. And those kids have no business being on a platform like this.
And Frances Haugen has made it quite explicitly clear this is Facebook's attempt at hooking a new audience ever younger.
That's right. I think the Facebook documents showed that Instagram kids, it's not about safety. It's not about giving kids another place to go. It's about building lifetime brand loyalty and dependence on Facebook products.
Haugen says she would be amazed if Facebook actually gave up this plan for good, and that she expects a conversation similar to this one to be happening in about a year's time. I guess that means you need to be ready for another pushback.
Well, we're going to be keeping the pressure up. In the meantime, we're going to, Facebook says they're doing this pause so they can hear from the experts. We'll bring as many experts in to talk to Facebook as they want. We'll keep the pressure up in Washington and keep the pressure up from regulators and politicians, because this is absolutely a harmful product, and we need to draw some red lines around Facebook. If Facebook goes forward with Instagram for kids when the entire world is opposed to it, then what we're saying is that Facebook has absolutely no accountability to anybody. And I don't think that would be good for kids, and I don't think that would be good for democracies around the world.
Josh, just a final question for you. I understand you're trying to raise your own daughter free of social media as much as you can. It must be very difficult. How on earth are you trying to do that? Any tips for other parents out there?
Well, I think you need to start young. You need to start young with keeping screen time really limited. You need to have firm rules around when screens can be used and when they can't. And you need to help your children develop other ways of entertaining themselves, because with the screen and social media is going to be the default, that's what they're always going to turn to. It also helps to talk to other parents, because one of the things you hear from your kids is, I'm the only one that's not on Instagram. So if you can do this, parent as a community, and make decisions collectively that we're going to keep our kids off this platform, it will be much easier for your children, and it will be much easier for you as a parent.
Josh Golin, thank you so much for your contributions to the Nexus, and good luck with your campaign. Much appreciated. Well, Facebook and Instagram's detrimental effects on children is just one of the concerns raised by Frances Haugen. She also brought up how Facebook makes money in volatile countries by allowing its platforms to be used to stoke division and ethnic tensions.
We had a joke inside of Civic Integrity that if you wanted to know what the next batch of at-risk countries was going to be, all you had to do was look 2 years in the past at what the Facebook connectivity countries were, and that's what they were going to be.
The areas of civic disinformation that you were working on included what?
In most of the world, because there isn't third-party fact-checking, because the basic integrity and safety systems are not supported in almost all the languages in the world. You know, there's 5,000 languages in the world. Facebook supports maybe 50. In other parts of the world, that misinformation is directly leading to people dying, right? You'll have incidences where in a village in Africa, someone will send in a picture of a massacre that is allegedly happening in the next village and say, grab your guns, come save your cousins. So what do you think happens when a bunch of people with guns shows up in the next village?
Well, in her testimony, Francis specifically mentions the ethnic violence in Myanmar, where about half the population use the platform. It's the primary source of news for many. Earlier this year, the human rights group Global Witness stated that Facebook's algorithm breached its own policies by promoting posts inciting violence against protesters who were against the military coup. A couple of years ago, The Guardian also reported how Facebook allowed an explosion of hate speech against Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar. Haugen also warned that the same sort of things are happening in Ethiopia, where the federal government is battling the Tigray People's Liberation Front. And it's not just faraway countries. Haugen is also warning that Facebook is being used to undermine democracy in her home, America. And this is where American conservatives start to get a bit suspicious. They suspect she's a left-winger who's only speaking out because she wants the US government to crack down on conservatives, but not liberals. Here's a few reasons why they're suspicious. 37-year-old Frances Haugen's been working in liberal Silicon Valley for the past decade, pretty much her entire career since leaving college. First, she joined Google, then Yelp, Pinterest, and finally Facebook. Records show that during that time, she donated regularly to political action committees supporting Democrat politicians, including the self-described socialist Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. When she joined Facebook, it was on the condition that she worked at the so-called Civic Integrity Unit, basically a censorship board. She was therefore quite likely to be part of the team that banned Facebook users from sharing a damaging story about Joe Biden's son, Hunter, which was published by the New York Post just before the election. Strangely enough, the Civil Integrity Unit was disbanded after the election once Biden had won.
They told us, we're dissolving civic integrity. Like, they basically said, oh, good, we made it through the election. There wasn't riots. We can get rid of civic integrity now. Fast forward a couple months, we got the insurrection.
Haugen believes the pro-Trump January 6 riots at Capitol Hill prove the Civil Integrity Unit and censorship is still very much needed.
As soon as the election was over, they turned them back off, or they changed the settings back to what they were before to prioritize growth over safety.
Haugen's focus on pro-Trump supporters and demands for more government censorship on Facebook has some conservatives doubting her motives.
It's a trap. I've warned you over and over. It's a trap. The Facebook whistleblower is a trap. It is simply a Democrat. I'm not going to call it a conspiracy because it may have been a wink and a nod. They don't have to conspire. They just got a wink and nod. They all know what they're going to do. It is a trap to push for Facebook to censor conservatives.
But for Democrat politicians, she's a godsend.
Thank you, Ms. Haugen. You are a 21st century American hero, warning our country of the danger for young people, for our democracy, and our nation owes you.
So is this whistleblower going to be a force for good or ill? What kind of changes does she really want to see at Facebook, Instagram, and elsewhere? Let's bring in our guest now. We have Scotty Nell up there. She's a political commentator in Washington, D.C. Victoria Marshall is a writer at the New York Post. And Gregory Dickinson is a professor of law at St. Thomas University of Law in Miami. His research focuses on internet law and technology. Welcome to all of you. Victoria, I'd like to start with you. Your article came out straight after Haugen gave her testimony, and you wrote, "How convenient that Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen just gave the social network another excuse to crack down on conservative content." You've also written, "Seems like Haugen and Facebook have been on the same side this entire time, and it makes sense as Haugen doesn't actually want to break up Facebook." First of all, where do you get those suspicions from?
Well, first of all, after Haugen's testimony, the director of policy communications at Facebook actually released a statement saying that while they don't agree with all of Haugen's testimony, she basically said that they actually want to create new standards for the internet. They're basically agreeing with Haugen. That's why I think they're on the same side, because they want to actually crack down on conservative content. Haugen is also a Democrat herself. She's donated to numerous progressive Democratic campaigns. She actually is getting communications advice from a former Obama administration aides communication company, and she's being represented by the same lawyer that represented the Ukrainian whistleblower, who actually, his testimony or his allegations led to the impeachment of former President Donald Trump.
Yeah. Gregory Dickinson, when you were listening to Frances Haugen's suggestions for how the government should regulate Facebook, what were the most important points she made?
So the big question here is who should be the actor? Haugen worked with Facebook, and she says she tried to work internally to change their procedures for a while, and was not able to make the kind of changes she wanted, and so now she's coming out. And she's very sincere. She really wants change, and she's seen some real harms in the world. You know, she's focused on some harms for teens and around the world with potential misinformation. But there's this concern, a very legitimate concern on the other side, that when you try to crack down on stuff like this, you almost invariably press out certain voices from the discussion. And so I think there's despite her well-meaning, there's risks both ways here, whether we stay as we are or whether we try to censor some of this material.
And what would be the most substantive recommendations she's made for increasing and improving censorship of Facebook and their subsidiaries?
Yeah, so some of her proposals, I should say, are focusing on viral distribution of material. For instance, the algorithms at Facebook, when they detect that something is being viewed by a lot of people, is really engaging their community, they have an economic incentive to spread that around very broadly, because that gets eyeballs on their material, gives them a lot of data that they can then monetize. And so some of her proposals would focus on limiting the spread of viral content, and perhaps even especially what somebody, it's unclear who, would have to characterize as misinformation or dangerous content. So the spread of, or viral spread of information seems to be a key focus of hers.
Right, and she also has proposed reforming Section 230, which governs online platforms like Facebook. Can you just explain what Section 230 is and why it would be important to reform it?
Of course. So Section 230 is a law passed in 1996, and its key concern is to make sure that online companies aren't liable for things that their users do or say. And so, for instance, if Facebook was liable every time somebody told a falsehood on its platform, it would cease to exist. You couldn't have the internet that we have today if Facebook was liable every time somebody said something untrue or did something unlawful. And so Section 230 says if somebody sues Facebook or somebody sues an online entity, they aren't liable for things that their users do. It's the users themselves who are liable. And what reforming Section 230 could arguably do to work on some of these problems is if you limited immunity and said, well, maybe Facebook, you can be liable for things that people do on your platform. Maybe that would press Facebook to more aggressively monitor what's going on if it was worried about being liable for the things that its users did. I think that's dangerous to tinker with. I think that risks undermining a very important mechanism for free expression. But that's the argument,
right? That
if we take away this immunity from Facebook, it might be forced to change.
Scotty, on the face of it, changing the algorithm so that it doesn't promote such incendiary content, and also reforming Section 230 to make contributors, users, if you like, more responsible, more accountable for what they've written. On the face of it, those suggestions seem reasonable. What do you make of them?
Oh, they seem reasonable, but like everything else, it comes down to the details. Listen, Haugen has no problem with the power that Facebook has. She just has the problem with she wants it more distributed, more judiciary, and she wants it to be distributed according to her terms and things that she likes. See, Section 230, on one hand, yes, it's about protecting the social media platforms, but it means that it keeps them as a platform. But there's also some major tax benefits for these social media platforms like Facebook, and that is why conservatives for the past 4 years have called for Section 230 to be reformed, because these algorithms, the same one that Haugen was behind, have been able to push certain media, certain news stories over others. And conservatives say that they have been for a long time discriminated against, as their stories have been either kicked off or they've been limited versus the stories of the other side. But here's what I think the bigger question is. Haugen being called a whistleblower is absolutely insulting to those real whistleblowers that are sitting in jail right now, like Julian Assange and others, or who are facing bankruptcy because the bigger powers that be don't want them to tell their stories. Real whistleblowers don't show up on 60 Minutes and then the next day, just magically in Washington, D.C., a land where nothing happens quickly, there is a congressional hearing calling for reforms. So I think there is some real credence to why people are very concerned about if this is a legitimate whistleblower trying to show attention on a platform that doesn't even really appeal to the teenagers that she says she's trying to say.
Strange thing is, Scotty, I mean, if you look at it just on its face, it does appear that she is risking her career to make these allegations.
One thing I do want to point out, let's just take away this idea that she's working with Facebook, fine. She does still possibly stand to profit, in fact, be the most profitable Facebook employee outside of management with this, now that we have this SEC whistleblower program that has provided more than $1 billion out, including this latest award to 2 people of $114 million that they split. So she's far from going to be damaging her career. She actually might be the most highest paid employee at Facebook.
Victoria, I know, like Scotty, you're very skeptical about her motivations. I mean, what makes you think that she's actually sort of working hand in glove with Facebook here? And would you go as far as to say it's almost like a false flag operation? She's provoking a change that will actually benefit Facebook by initially sort of defaming them, if you like?
Yes, I mean, certainly. When she was asked in Congress whether she wanted to break up Facebook, she said no. Instead, she wants it to remain a trillion-dollar monopoly, censoring the content it deems misinformation or hate. But she never defined what misinformation or hate was. The context was always right-wing content. So I can only assume that she just gave the green light to Silicon Valley, Twitter, Facebook, any social media companies to crack down on conservative content they deem as misinformation, which would include the New York Post column about the Wuhan lab theory, or basically coronavirus leaking from the Wuhan lab. That was heavily censored by Facebook and Twitter, as well as our expose on the Hunter Biden laptop story, which was actually going to be damning to President Joe Biden. But that was censored.
Did you ever get a response from Facebook about censoring the the Hunter Biden laptop story?
I don't think we did. I think they ended up allowing it on the platform again, but it was still not able to be widely distributed across its platforms. It was still kind of under some level of censorship.
Gregory,
even though political.
Yeah, sorry, Gregory, we're running out of time. I need to ask you, do you think that Haugen is in some way working to benefit Facebook and to increase censorship so that it actually harms conservatives and gives the advantage to liberals?
So as far as actual motivations, I'm skeptical that this is all a big plot, but I agree that it's a real danger. Even people who are well-meaning at Facebook, for instance, if they tend to be liberal-minded, what they're going to perceive as misinformation could disproportionately be conservative content, like this lab leak theory or like the Hunter Biden story. You don't have to be malicious or intentional about it to have it accidentally show through in the decisions that you happen to make about what you perceive as misinformation. And that's why it's dangerous to have either the government or a very large, nearly monopolistic private entity making decisions about what counts as misinformation.
We had a guest on earlier who suggested that Facebook ought to be prosecuted for the way it's handled how it engages with children, particularly on Instagram, and how it hooks them. Can you see a prosecution happening in the near future?
So that sounds, I should preface this, I'm not a criminal lawyer, and so I can't comment with legal expertise, but that sounds hyperbolic rather than a likely theory based on what I know now. And yet there is real harm being caused to children.
Gregory Dickinson, Victoria Marshall, and Scotty Nell Hughes, thank you all for your contributions to The Nexus today. And thank you at home and on your phones for watching. Remember, if you want to see this episode or any of our previous episodes, do go to our channel on YouTube. Just type in Nexus TRT World. Till next week then, goodbye.